everybody, welcome back to Teaching Music to a Different Beat. I am so glad that you are here. I love revising curriculum. I absolutely love it so much because it's one, challenging, and two, also because I really think that there's just so much possibility when you are in the zone for revising curriculum. There's just so many opportunities that we can do things a little bit different. So if you are somebody who's thinking to yourself, hey, I want to revise my curriculum and I'm just going to go all in, guns a-blazing, and do this, stop for a second, just for a moment, and please consider these things that I'm going to bring up to you because they really do have a huge impact on curriculum. And frankly, I think that a lot of people, myself included, a lot of people don't always take these things into account. So anyway, the very first thing I want to talk about is context. And that's what this whole video is about, context. Context is key. It's absolutely the most important thing when it comes to curriculum revision. And everything else that I'm going to talk about today is under that umbrella of context. Okay, so context is key. What I mean by that is that your students, your school, you as the teacher, everybody has their own context. There is no such thing as anybody having the same context as you. Let's say you had 3 music teachers in your school and you're all teaching K-5 general music, or you're all teaching band, or whatever you're all teaching. You're all teaching the same thing in the same school with the same students. Doesn't matter because the context changes. And that's because you are the person who changes the context. There are no 2 teachers that are alike, and so therefore there is no such thing as the same context. So the very first thing under that context umbrella that I want to talk about is school climate. School climate is a really huge umbrella, but really it's what is actually feasibly possible for you to do in the current school that you're practicing in right now. So for example, what are the school values? What about your administrator? What do they value, right? The administrator, if they are a good one, is supposed to drive the ship. So what do they value? Because you want an administrator that's going to be supportive of whatever types of curricular revisions that you want to do. What about the resources that you're going to be using or maybe not using? Do you have access to resources? So for example, if you want to start like a modern band and you really want to be accessible, and you don't want students to have their own instruments all the time, they can use instruments at school. Well, that requires resources, right? That requires instruments, it requires funding, it requires space, it requires certain amounts of resources to make that happen, right? What's your school budget look like? What about human resources? Do you actually have enough people power to do all the things that you're hoping to do in the classroom? Do you have enough paraeducators? Do you have enough music teachers? Do you have support assistants? What do you have? What does the schedule look like? Gosh, I look a lot on Facebook and I see a lot of people's, issues with scheduling. And I'm seeing some schools, giving you 25 minutes once a week for general music, which to me is insane, right? It's insane. Now, obviously you're going to advocate for more time, but what happens if you can't get more time? Okay, what does that scheduling look like? What can you do well in the schedule that you are given? You don't want to do revisions for a curriculum that are then just not going to be feasible for the school. So you want to operate not necessarily with your head in the sand, but really kind of aware of what really is going to fly. Okay, so school climate, that's the first thing. The second thing that I want you to think about is your students. The second thing to think about are your students. This really should be the first thing. Your students still should take the cake as far as what is important under that umbrella of context. So what do they need? What do they need socially? What do they need academically? What do you need to help them both socially and academically in and out of the classroom? What do they want? Like, how many times have I said, and I know other people say this too, but how many times have we actually asked our students, what do you want? What do you want to learn? What are you interested in? Right? And How many times have we actually acted upon that? I know some of us are great at that, right? But sometimes we ask what they want, right, at the beginning of the school year, and then we don't really do much with it. We're like, oh, thanks, cool. Or we'll do like a little inventory of what are your interests and what kind of music do you like. But when we revise curriculum, we could take those wants into consideration as a driving force for at least some of what to do moving forward in the future. So students are the main driving force. Okay. The third thing that drives the curriculum, I say this all the time to teachers that I work with, but I always say, who is in the room with you that is not actually really in the room with you? There are people in the room who have a stake in what's happening in the classroom that are not even there. And what I mean are members of the community. So your community members, your school board, who is in the room without actually being in the room? What are their expectations? What are their guidelines? What do they want? So these are things that drive curriculum. School board for sure. In the community, if it's not the school board, what are the community expectations? Are you in a town where you're so used to being competitive and getting all of those top ratings and going to those marching band competitions and just knocking it out of the park that way? Or are you a town that doesn't necessarily matter so much competitively, but the arts matter tremendously? Or are you in a town that just doesn't really care about the arts? These are very real things that drive your context. What are their expectations? And also, alongside that, what is the expertise that is embedded in the community? So if you have a community that has, for example, a really strong heritage or culture, and they're really proud of that culture, who are the experts in the community that can come into your classroom and help strengthen the curriculum? Like, there's nobody in music who knows everything about every culture. You're an expert on your own culture, and that is it. Okay. But if you have a community where you have experts in the community, how can that inform your curriculum? That's actually kind of cool. Who can you invite into the room to be a part of the curriculum? I bet you that there are so many experts out in your community that you might not be aware of. Those are really cool opportunities, and it's one way to kind of revise your curriculum. Okay, so the fourth thing that I want to talk about is your personal training and development as a music teacher. I'm not sure about you, but I can tell you that when I was teaching full-time in the schools, I taught what I was really comfortable in. I just did. I taught what I felt good about. I taught what I felt really knowledgeable about. I taught how I was taught to teach. And sometimes that was great. And a lot of times it just didn't meet the needs of my students. And I learned that the hard way a lot of times. And so my own deficits as a teacher had negatively impacted my curriculum. It negatively impacted my choices, not just on what I was teaching, but how I was teaching my students, the what and the how. It impacted both of those. And so I truly believe that everyone is just doing the best they can. But if you're somebody who's like, you know what, I kind of want to learn more about, I don't know, hip hop, or I want to learn more about this type of musical genre that I'm not an expert in, and maybe I want to, commit to using that or including that a little bit more in my curriculum, and go do it. Like, that's a really cool thing, especially around summertime, right? Go do it. Go learn about the stuff that you don't know. Go practice the stuff that you're just not good at, because at some point you'll get better at it. And then you'll have the confidence to go ahead and put that in the curriculum. And if you don't have that confidence, if you feel like there's that missing piece, go find an expert who can help you. Or better yet, go find an expert who can come into the room with you, right? Or just kind of zoom in and beam in, okay? Don't let your own training and development be a hindrance to you. Do whatever you have to do to add that one thing into the curriculum, so that way you can feel good about it. So don't let your own development, or maybe your fear or your lack of development, don't let that get in the way of making some curricular changes. finally, the fifth thing that I want to talk about is your own personal philosophies of teaching and learning. So what I mean by that is, sometimes, actually, let me walk that back for a second. Sometimes I'll go into a district and I'll help a district out with curriculum and assessment and all that stuff. I'll help them align things. And one of the first things that we do is we try as best we can to align philosophies. I will tell you that I've never really been able to fully align people's philosophies. Everybody has their philosophies, but one of the biggest philosophies that we try to at least address during the workshops and professional development is this idea of process over product. Okay, what's more important? Is the process more important? Is the act of music making more important? Or our performance is more important? Is getting high scores more important? Same idea, this idea of what music literacy is. What do you think music literacy is? Not everybody defines it the same way. I would say a lot of people define music literacy as being able to read notes on the staff and being able to read them and play them, right? But then other people define it as, well, no, you shouldn't have to be able to read notes to be a musician. That is a really big philosophy. Wherever you land on that is clearly where you land on that. But take that into account when you're revising curriculum. So your philosophies of teaching and learning, where do you think music should play a role in students' lives? Where do you think it should play a role in the community? What is the role of music? These are big, heavy-hitting questions, very big ones, but your philosophy is really crucial here, because if you're developing lessons and curriculum that doesn't align with your philosophies of teaching or learning, then you're gonna find some discord, some disconnect. I'm gonna give you one example. If you've been watching my YouTube channel at all or reading my blogs, my personal philosophy is that every child should have access to music education on every level. And that as a teacher, it is my job to do that as best I can. That's my philosophy. Now, when I look at some of my older lesson plans, that did not show up in my lesson plans. It didn't show up. I wasn't living that philosophy. I didn't realize I wasn't living it, right? I said, I don't think anybody wakes up and says, okay, today I'm going to be a bad music teacher. But I did not write lesson plans that were truly accessible and inclusive and making space for all students. I would have one type of activity. I would have one type of assessment. I had no idea what to do with children who had autism. It was, it wasn't that great. I just was not that good. And so my philosophy that I had about that didn't actually manifest itself in my curriculum on most days. That was really hard for me to uncover that. It was super necessary to uncover that, but it was difficult at the same time. So aligning what your beliefs are with what's actually happening in the day-to-day is super, super crucial. So these are the 5 things to consider before you start just doing a deep dive into the switching out repertoire and lesson plans and all of the stuff that I call into the weeds. In the weeds we go. I always say, in the weeds we go. Let's just go to the lesson plan and let's create the new rubric, or let's create a new lesson plan, or let's add something different. That's in the weeds. Before you can get into the weeds, which we're so tempted to do all the time, get into that big umbrella of context, because context really does drive everything. Okay? I wish you luck. This is not easy. My ultimate recommendation is that you just pick, like everything I've been saying here, you pick one thing to tackle. Don't worry too much about anything else, but pick one thing to tackle and you do your best with it. Practice doing the things that you're not good at yet. That's the best that you can do. That's the best that I can do. And I wish you the best with all of that. Thanks so much, folks. I hope you're having a great day. Take care. Bye-bye.